He was about my age and kind of goofy and pigeon-toed. He moved in a rubbery way and barely spoke. He shrugged his shoulders a lot. Ace turned up late and refused to carry anything, not one thing. When we arrived at the club and parked out back, Ace did the same thing. He sat in the back of the van and didn't carry anything. Ace pulled out his penis, totally out of the blue, and said, "This is my dick without a hard on." I didn't know what was up with Ace and Peter and their dick-size obsessions. Though as time went on, I began to suspect that this was the way they defined themselves and what was important to them. Ace sat on his ass and boozed. We were still getting used to his personality. The shows confirmed that he was everything we were looking for musically. But they also confirmed the fact that he was one of the laziest people, no, the laziest person I had ever met. Ace had babbled into the mic during one of the shows, as Ace, as usual, refused to help and drove about 20 miles outside of the city. Gene and I knew we would be depended on to bring in the songs for Kiss because Peter and Ace never showed much ambition in that department. Before and after the shows, Ace continued to say, "I don't want to carry shit." I wasn't being charitable to his lazy ass. The first day, Ace went out for a walk and I decided to take a shower. While I was in there, the bathroom started to smell horrible. I pulled open the curtain to see what it could be, and there was Ace sitting on the toilet taking a dump. Ace was an alcoholic. In some ways, it was pathetic. Once he mixed in Valium and cocaine, it wasn't as funny anymore. We also called Ace Scraps back then because he often reached across the table and took stuff off our plates. If someone had shrimp, Ace would eat the tails you left on the plate. Sometimes in motels, he would rummage through discarded room service trays as we walked down the hallways. Ace was increasingly self-destructive in a way that chipped away at his talent. One night, he repeatedly drove his rental car down a steep, winding road to see how fast he could go and still make the turn at the bottom. The ultimate outcome of the experiment would have been obvious to anyone but an inebriated Ace. And sure enough, he finally lost control of the car and wrapped it around a pole. We weren't yet to the point where we had to desperately try to get a solo out of him before he passed out in the studio, although that would soon come, but he certainly wasn't fully realizing his potential and giving his all. And we began to have to work around Ace, who spent much of the recording process with his priorities far from where they belonged. He sometimes played his parts with his rings and chains scraping against the fretboard and pickups and then wanted to quit for the day and take off. No, Ace, that's shit. His alcohol abuse is well documented, but Ace also didn't hesitate to just up and leave the studio to go play cards with friends. Ace bought knives all along the European tour, and on the way home, he taped a bunch of them to the inside of his Marshall cabinets to sneak them into the country. It pissed me off. If they were found, all our gear would be impounded. Ace also stashed drugs in the bags or pockets of crew members without their knowledge, so he wasn't on the hook if they were found. Ace was all about Ace, regardless of the cost to anyone else. He ate a lot of potato salad, and in general, he ate with his mouth open. He said it aerated the food. Ace was a shadow of his former self. But the booze and Valium and Coke and whatever else now left him incapacitated almost all the time. We prayed we'd be able to get a solo out of him before he passed out. He wasn't funny anymore, in any way. When he tried to tell jokes, he had to stop and slur, "How's it go again?" Peter and Ace began to believe they were world-class virtuosos despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Both Peter and Ace were fucked up all the time. I'd seen plenty of functional addicts. Their jealousy and envy and resentment got focused on the most tangible thing they could pin it on. The two of them tried to sabotage the band. Ace and Peter were deeply into drugs and alcohol and alternated between hostility and incoherence. When they weren't incapacitated, they caused headaches for everyone around them. Barely sentient beings most of the time who didn't care and were often either too fucked up or too inept to play their parts on recordings without great effort or a nameless ringer filling in for them. Peter and Ace didn't agree. The press reinforced what they wanted to think, that they were world-class musicians. Of course, Ace could really have been one, but he was killing his talent and his body and brain with booze and drugs. Peter and Ace frequently left during filming. In one scene, we had to use Ace's stunt double. who happened to be black. After Ace left without notice, we wished each other anything but good luck. By this point, we were stuck in an ongoing yo-yoing process with Ace and Peter. Are they in or out? Can we keep this going? Ace can say whatever he wants now, but he voted to fire Peter without any prodding or strong-arming. It's a tribute to Ace that he did. Whatever relationship he'd had with Peter was strictly mercenary. Ace was smart, and he manipulated Peter to help him vote for things he wanted. Ace didn't even travel to Toronto. It's all well and good for him to say in retrospect that he didn't like the musical direction the band was taking, but the fact is that even if we had been doing exactly what he wanted to do musically, he was too wasted to play. He didn't need an excuse to drink. He was a drunk. He was bombed all the time. Many pages of Ace's past are now blank. That's how blasted he was. He was living in a constant state of blackout. Ace insisted on getting more money than Peter because, as Ace put it, Peter wasn't worth as much as he was. Peter hasn't done anything, Ace insisted. He hasn't been playing, and I'm more famous than he is. Of course, this was all behind Peter's back. For all the times Ace threw Peter under the bus, he should have had muscles like a professional bodybuilder. It was true that Ace liked to portray himself as some sort of American Keith Richards. Ace, as usual, was just lazy, but he put in his time. Ace kept gabbing on and on into the microphone, which was distracting and clearly about trying to reclaim more of the spotlight. Then Ace asked, "Why do we need to rehearse? I know these songs like the back of my hand." It quickly became apparent that Ace didn't know the back of his hand very well. Some nights, Ace nodded out while putting his makeup on, just slumped into his chair with a paintbrush practically stuck in his eye. Ace was now traveling with 17 bags, including one that weighed more than 100 pounds. Ace was chronically late getting out of his hotel room when we needed to get to a venue. Ace was late for all of them. Ace was now, in Tommy's words, a fucking Peter loser. looked completely different from them, and he exuded Quite quickly,
an air
both
of
Peter and
confidence.
Ace came to resent the
swagger.
fact that they weren't as worldly
The crowd
or
was sparse,
savvy
but
when it
something
came to
about his
maneuvering in
performance
nice
struck me.
surroundings.
He played the bar like it was a packed
Ace
arena.
started getting
He was into
paranoid.
it.
He had rented an apartment
Still,
off La
for all he
Cienega
lacked in
Boulevard in
continuity,
L.A.
he
and
played
spent
with
off
fire and
days there.
vitality.
But he was convinced the
scrappy.
place was bugged, that he was being watched. "I'm actually responsible for the whole reunion," Ace said. "Okay. If I had never quit, there wouldn't be a reunion." Ace sucker punched Tommy at one of the shows. Peter and Ace just couldn't master anymore. Peter and Ace didn't show up. Ace didn't show up for one of the rehearsals. Millions of excuses. Still, Ace continued to think and act like he was irreplaceable. He continued to show total disregard for everyone else, continued to act as if we were blessed to